Welcome to Talk Treatises.
Wait, what?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the literal header of the document we have in front of us today. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone.
You actually had me worried there for a second. I thought we completely rebranded overnight.
No rebranding, but today's deep dive does feel a little, dangerous, honestly.
That is a very strong opening. Usually we're diving into, historical events or tech trends or some forgotten scandal. Why dangerous?
Because usually we take a topic, say, artificial intelligence or the fall of the Roman Empire, and we look at it, we are the observers. But today, based on this internal document you brought in, we're kind of turning the microscope around.
Right.
We're looking at the lens itself. We're looking at how we actually think.
That is entirely accurate. And frankly, it is about time we did this. We spend so much of our lives just consuming information, right? Scrolling through feeds, nodding along to headlines, but we rarely pause to audit the actual operating system that processes all that information.
Exactly. So for you listening right now, here is the setup for today. We have gotten our hands on this fascinating piece of internal documentation. It's essentially a production manifesto, like a style guide, for a very high-level philosophy discussion forum and audio show called Talk Treatises.
But calling it a style guide is kind of like calling the U.S. Constitution a meeting agenda.
Right.
I mean, technically it is, but it's also a whole lot more than that.
Yeah, when I first opened this file, I genuinely expected, font choices, microphone settings, maybe some tips on vocal warm-up.
The usual technical specs.
Exactly. But instead what I found was this rigorous, almost intimidation-level manifesto on epistemology.
And there is our first big word of the day, epistemology.
Let's define that before we go any further, because this entire document really hinges on it.
Sure. So simply put, epistemology is the study of knowledge. It asks all the really annoying questions.
It's the ones kids ask.
Right? Like, how do you know that? What separates a justified belief from just a random guess? What is the actual structure of truth? This document, this Talk Treatises manifesto, is essentially a boot camp for epistemological rigor.
It really is.
It's a guide on how to stop just repeating what you've heard and start actually understanding what you say.
It's the antidote to what I like to call cocktail party knowledge.
Oh, I love that term.
You know exactly what I mean, where you're at a gathering and you say, oh yes, Schrodinger's cat, and it involves a cat in a box.
And maybe some poison.
Yeah, but you have absolutely no idea why it involves quantum superposition or what the thought experiment was actually trying to prove.
The document itself refers to that as the bumper sticker version of the truth. And it basically declares total war on it.
Total war. So here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to completely deconstruct this manifesto. We're going to learn the rules it imposes on its speakers.
And they are strict rules.
Very strict. By the end of this hour, we want to give you, the listener, a toolkit. We want to upgrade your internal processor so that the next time you read a news article or hear a debate or even have a thought of your own, you can analyze it with the precision of a trained philosopher.
We're aiming for that +3 standard deviation thinking.
You're jumping ahead.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
But yes, that is the ultimate goal. We're going to break this down into 6 parts, covering everything from the mindset to the mechanics, and finally we're going to test it all with a massive thought experiment.
I am ready whenever you are.
Let's dive right into part 1, the mindset of the philosopher.
So the document opens with a section on intellectual benchmarks, and it drops a very specific metric right out of the gate. It says your IQ is your normal benchmark +3 standard deviations.
+3 standard deviations. Now, I will be completely honest with you. When I first read that, my knee-jerk reaction was, okay, this sounds incredibly elitist.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like it's saying we are the geniuses and everyone else is just trying to catch up.
I can entirely see why you would read it that way, but I think you need to look at the broader context of what they're trying to achieve. It is not a claim about the speaker's innate biology or arrogance. It's actually a command about how you treat the audience.
How so?
Well, think about how most media is produced today. TV news, viral videos, even a lot of modern educational content. It is almost always designed for the lowest common denominator.
Right.
The assumption in the production room is usually the audience is distracted, they're tired. Whatever you do, don't use big words, keep it snappy, dumb it down.
To keep it simple, stupid principle. Yeah. Or that old idea that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it.
Which is a nice sentiment, but it's sometimes just completely false.
Because some things are just complex.
Exactly. Some things are genuinely complex. This manifesto flips that entire script. The +3 standard deviation rule is a calibration tool. It's saying, assume your listener is smarter than you are.
Oh, that's a huge shift.
It really is. Assume they are highly educated, immensely curious, and completely capable of handling complex, nuanced ideas. It's really a mandate of respect for the listener.
So instead of dumbing it down so everyone can get it, you're forced to level up. You have to assume that if you leave a hole in your logic, the listener's going to immediately find it.
Precisely. If you assume the listener is brilliant, you just cannot get away with lazy logic. You can't just wave your hands and say, well, science stuff happens here, let's move on.
Right.
You have to explain the actual mechanism because you assume the listener will catch you if you're faking it. It creates this intense pressure cooker for the host to be absolutely impeccable.
That is a serious high-wire act, though, because there's a very fine line between high-level discussion and incomprehensible academic jargon. The document actually addresses this directly, doesn't it?
It does, yes. It explicitly warns against using jargon just to sound smart. It says you must explain technical terms, but, and this is the key distinction, you explain them without being patronizing.
How do you do that in practice?
You don't say, now, for the simple folks in the back, this means whatever. You say, this concept, known as the categorical imperative, implies X, Y, and Z. You treat the definition as a core part of the analysis, not some kind of timeout for the slow kids.
That makes total sense. It also sends a very specific vibe. I actually love this description. It says the tone should be conversational but sharp, like an experienced philosopher at a dinner party.
The dinner party analogy is really the North Star of this whole document. Everything points back to it.
But let's really parse that, because I've been to dinner parties with philosophers, or at least, guys who thought they were philosophers.
We all have.
And they were mostly unbearable. They lecture, they drone on, they completely kill the vibe of the room.
Yeah, we've all been trapped in that corner of the room. Someone is passionately explaining Nietzsche while literally spitting croutons at you.
Exactly.
But the document clarifies this. It says the host should be intelligent and witty, engaging in playful banter, but you must treat serious topics with poise and solemnity.
That is a really tricky balance to strike. It's essentially saying you can laugh, you can have a big personality, but you do not treat the actual truth as a joke.
Right. Think about the absolute best conversations you have ever had in your life. Maybe it was late at night, maybe there were drinks involved, you're laughing, you're teasing each other, but you're also digging into something very real.
Like the big questions.
Exactly. There's free will real. Does God exist? What is the fundamental nature of love? You aren't lecturing at each other, you're exploring together. It's electric. That is the exact energy this document demands from its speakers.
It makes the learning active, not passive. It's not a monologue. It's a dynamic exchange of ideas.
It's a contact sport. Ideas are physically bumping into each other. And just like a good dinner party, you don't bring up a topic unless you actually have something interesting to say about it. You don't just sit there and read the Wikipedia page to your guests.
Now, speaking of reading the Wikipedia page, there's a rule in this mindset section that I think is arguably the most radical instruction in the whole text. It's the no attribution rule.
Ah, yes. The rule that says you do not reference provided sources directly.
And it goes on to say you never talk about specific source names.
This is where the document completely breaks away from traditional academia. In a university paper, if you don't cite your sources, you get expelled for plagiarism. Here, they are strictly forbidding citations. Why do you think that is?
Well, my initial thought was that it just makes for much better audio. Hearing someone say, as stated in the Journal of Applied Psychology, Volume 4, Issue 3, it's just boring. It completely breaks the flow of a good conversation.
That is definitely part of it, for sure. Flow matters a lot in audio, but there's a much deeper epistemological reason here. Think about what a citation actually does for the speaker.
I mean, it gives credit. It proves to the audience that you did the work and didn't just make it up.
Yes, but it also provides a massive shield. If I say, Nietzsche argues that God is dead, and you get incredibly mad at that statement, I could just hold up my hand and say, hey, take it up with Nietzsche. I'm just reporting what the guy said.
Oh, I see. It distances you from the idea. I'm just the messenger, so I take zero risk.
Exactly. By removing the citation. By forcing you to just look at the listener and say, the argument is that the concept of the divine has lost its binding force on society. You have to actually own the idea.
Wow.
You have to internalize it, digest it, and speak it as if it is your own fundamental understanding of the world.
It moves the entire conversation from reporting to knowing.
That is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
You cannot just repeat the sentence from the page. You have to understand the architecture of the thought well enough to rebuild it entirely in your own words. You have to metabolize the information.
It's like the difference between a tour guide just reading a memorized script about a cathedral and the actual architect explaining why the arches are shaped that specific way.
The architect does not need to look at the blueprints. They know exactly where the load-bearing walls are. This manifesto wants you to be the architect. It demands that you strip away the safety net of saying someone else said this, and you stand naked with the argument.
That is terrifying, honestly. Because if you get it wrong, it is entirely on you. You can't blame the textbook.
And that fear is exactly the point. It forces you to check your facts obsessively. It forces you to actually understand the material, not just memorize a summary.
So we've got the mindset down. We are operating at +3 standard deviations. We are at the world's best dinner party, and we are the architects of the ideas we're discussing. Now we move to part 2, which they call the anti-summary approach.
This is where we officially take up arms against the bumper sticker.
The document is completely ruthless about this. It says, most people know the bumper sticker version of a classic philosopher's ideas. You go deeper into what they actually wrote and why.
Let's dwell on this bumper sticker concept for a moment because it really defines our entire modern media landscape. Why do bumper stickers even exist in the first place?
Because they're sticky, they're memorable, they fit perfectly in a short text or on a t-shirt. Survival of the fittest, I think therefore I am, God is dead, hell is other people.
Right. They are extremely high-efficiency transmission vehicles for ideas. They are memes, in the original biological sense of the word. But the inherent problem is that efficiency almost always comes at the direct cost of nuance. A bumper sticker is just a conclusion stripped of all its premises.
It's the final answer without any of the math that got you there.
And often, the pop culture version of the idea is just flat out wrong. Or at the very least, it's a gross caricature. Take survival of the fittest, since you brought that up.
The ultimate bumper sticker.
In the popular imagination, what does that actually mean to most people?
It means the strongest win. The alpha wolf takes the pack, the ruthless corporate CEO who crushes all the competition. It's basically an endorsement of brutality. It's eat or be eaten.
Exactly. But if you actually go back to the source, if you read Darwin or Herbert Spencer, who is the one who actually coined the phrase, fittest does not mean strongest. It means best fitted.
Best fitted to the specific environment.
Right. In some environments, the fittest organism is the one who cooperates the most with its neighbors. In other environments, the fittest is the smallest, the quietest, the one that hides best. The pop culture bumper sticker preaches dominance, but the actual text teaches adaptability. They are almost complete opposites.
That is fascinating. So the document commands us to explicitly distinguish between what the author actually argued and what popular culture claims they argued.
It asks us to perform a kind of intellectual excavation. We have to dig through all these thick layers of pop culture, all the misinterpretations, the terrible high school summaries, and get all the way down to the bedrock of the original text. We have to treat the idea as a primary source.
Which means we aren't just relying on a quick summary of the book. We are looking at the book itself. We are looking at the specific arguments.
And this leads to a very specific method of breakdown. The document asks us to always identify the premises and the logical steps.
This is where things get a bit technical. A philosophical argument is essentially a machine. It has input, which are the premises, and output, which is the conclusion. The document basically says, don't just show me the output. Show me the gears.
Most people out there only care about the output. Does this philosopher agree with my politics? But the true philosopher cares about the gears.
Can you give us a quick example of that? How exactly do you break down a machine of an idea?
Sure, let's take the Descartes example you mentioned earlier. I think, therefore I am. The bumper sticker version is just this nice little slogan about existence. It sounds like a positive self-affirmation you'd say to yourself in the bathroom mirror in the morning.
Right, I'm thinking, so I'm doing great, but what are the actual gears?
The machine there is a rigorous method of radical doubt. Descartes wanted to see if there was absolutely anything in the universe he could not doubt. So, premise 1, I can doubt the existence of the physical world. Maybe I'm currently dreaming, or maybe this whole reality is a simulation.
Which is very Matrix.
Exactly. Premise 2, I can even doubt my own physical body. Maybe my hands and eyes are an illusion fed to my mind.
Okay, so everything physical is gone.
Right. But premise 3, I absolutely cannot doubt that there is a doubting happening right now. The very act of doubting proves that a doubter exists. Therefore, conclusion, There must be a thinker to do the doubting.
When you lay it out step by step like that, it's not just a catchy slogan anymore. It is a mathematical, geometric proof.
And that right there is the Talk Treatises standard. You do not just tell the listener what Descartes thought. You show them exactly how he thought it. You invite the listener into that stove-heated room with him to do the radical doubting themselves. You make the listener the philosopher.
This anti-summary approach also touches on something you mentioned a bit earlier, which is the illusion of competence.
Yes, the danger of the summary is that it makes you feel incredibly smart without having to do any of the actual work. You read the 5-minute summary of War and Peace and you walk around thinking you know Tolstoy.
But you really don't.
You know the plot mechanics, sure, but you don't know the soul of the book. This manifesto demands that we touch the soul of the work.
Okay, so we've taken the engine apart. We clearly see the gears. But an engine doesn't make any sense if you don't know what a car is or what a road is. Which brings us naturally to part 3, contextualization as a tool for understanding.
Context is absolutely everything. The document is obsessive about history.
It lists 2 very specific questions that every single analysis must answer. Question 1, what was the prevailing view before this work? And question 2, what intellectual problem was the author trying to solve?
Those 2 questions are magic, because they turn a static, boring text into a dramatic narrative. Ideas do not just appear out of nowhere in a vacuum. They are weapons forged for a very specific battle.
I really like that idea of the prevailing view acting as the antagonist of the story.
It almost always is. If a philosopher sits down and writes a dense 500-page book, it is usually because they are deeply angry about something. They think the rest of the world is fundamentally wrong about something important. If you don't understand what they are fighting against, you simply cannot appreciate their victory.
It's like watching a boxing match where one of the fighters is completely invisible. You just see a guy in the ring punching the air. You really need to see the opponent to understand the footwork.
Exactly. A great example of this is Machiavelli's work. If we look at The Prince, the standard bumper sticker is just, be evil to keep your power.
Right. The ends justify the means. That's the slogan everyone knows.
But the context, the prevailing view of his time, was this highly idealized, completely chivalrous notion that a leader should be a literal saint, a pure moral exemplar. That was known as the mirror for Prince's tradition. Just be a good, pious person and your kingdom will magically flourish.
And what was the actual reality on the ground?
The reality was that Italy was being violently torn apart by endless wars, foreign invasions, and totally ruthless mercenaries. These saintly, pious leaders were getting completely slaughtered, and their innocent people were suffering horribly because of it.
So the intellectual problem he was desperately trying to solve wasn't, how do I be a cartoon villain? It was, how do I stop the chaos and save my state?
Correct. He was trying to solve the very real problem of stability in a violently fractured world. He was basically screaming, your saintliness is getting innocent people killed. You need to be effective instead of just looking holy. When you finally know that context, the book completely stops being a villain's instruction manual and starts being a desperate, practical plea for order.
The document also strongly highlights innovation and vocabulary. It asks the host to figure out what new vocabulary did they create and why did they need it.
This is a subtle but incredibly powerful tool for analyzing any text. Language is essentially the map of reality. If a thinker actually invents a brand new word, it means they found a piece of territory that just wasn't on the map yet.
They discovered a new island and they had to name it.
Or they discovered a completely new feeling or a new social dynamic. Think about the word gaslighting. That is a relatively new addition to our common everyday vocabulary, originally coming from a play in the 1930s. Before we had that specific word, we definitely had the experience someone manipulating your sense of reality to make you doubt your own sanity. But we couldn't easily point to it or name it. We just had to say, I feel crazy right now.
The word crystallized the entire concept. It made it tangible so we could fight it.
Exactly. So when the document asks about new vocabulary, it's really asking, what did this author see in the world that no one else had a name for yet? If you can answer that, you understand the very core of their innovation. It helps us see the idea technology they built.
Finally, under this context section, we have the chain of influence. The document asks us to look forward in time. It says to ask which thinkers engaged with this work directly, as critics, defenders, or inheritors.
This directly answers the so what question. Why are we still sitting around talking about this hundreds of years later?
The document uses a really great phrase right here. It asks if the arguments are live and unresolved.
Live and unresolved.
Yeah.
That phrase actually gives me chills. It heavily suggests that philosophy isn't just a dusty museum where we look at old bones. It is an active construction site, or maybe a battlefield where the smoke hasn't cleared yet.
It implies that we are actually still fighting the exact same battles today.
We absolutely are. Look at the intense debates we have today about AI regulation. It is essentially the exact same debate Plato had about the ship of state in the Republic. Who should steer the ship? The experts or the regular people?
Right.
If the experts steer, it's highly efficient, but it eventually becomes tyrannical.
Right.
If the people steer, it's beautifully free, but maybe completely disastrous because they don't know navigation.
Yeah.
And technology changes, the costumes change, but those fundamental human tensions, freedom versus security, individual versus the collective, those are totally unresolved.
So is a good deep dive necessarily connects the dead author to the living problem we have right now?
It has to. Otherwise, it is just history trivia. We want philosophy. We want to know how to actually live right now.
We've covered the mindset, the anti-summary, and the context. Now, we have to get our hands really dirty with the actual execution. Part 4, the rigor of analysis. This is the pure mechanics section.
This is where the rubber meets the road. How do you actually talk about this dense material for an hour without boring people to tears?
The document gives us some very clear tools for this. First, it says, break down complexity using clear analogies and reference familiar real-world examples.
You really have to note the word familiar there. This goes right back to the dinner party analogy. If you were explaining a complex economic theory, do not use 18th century wheat prices as your example. Use Bitcoin. Use the modern housing market.
Ground it in the listener's actual reality.
Exactly. Abstract ideas are incredibly slippery. Analogies act as handles. They give the mind something firm to grab onto. But the analogy has to be completely precise. A bad, sloppy analogy is far worse than no analogy at all.
But here is the major check on that. You can't just make things sound nice. You have to be intellectually honest. The document has a whole section dedicated to this called the duty to object.
This is critical to the whole enterprise. It explicitly says, address the strongest objections.
It notes that every great philosophical text has been criticized by serious thinkers.
This is what prevents the deep dive from just becoming a blind fan club. It is very easy to read a convincing, beautifully written book and just say, wow, this is the final answer to everything.
That is the epiphany trap. You basically fall in love with the very first good idea you hear.
Right. But real deep understanding requires a level of critical distance. You have to ask, okay, this sounds amazing, but where exactly does it break down?
And the document specifies you must address the strongest objections, not the weak ones.
In logic, we call this steel manning as opposed to straw manning. A straw man is a weak, fake version of your opponent's argument that is super easy to just knock down. My opponent hates freedom. That's a straw man. It's lazy thinking.
A steel man, on the other hand, is the absolute best possible version of the opposing view. It's like building your opponent a titanium suit of armor before you fight them.
Right. If you want to critique utilitarianism, don't critique a stupid, simplified version of it. Critique John Stuart Mill directly. Critique the very best version of the theory. If your idea can survive a brutal fight with the heavyweight champion, it's a genuinely good idea. If it can only beat up a toddler, it's worthless.
This requires the host to be essentially intellectually bilingual. You have to be able to speak the native language of the author completely sincerely, and then immediately switch gears and speak the language of their fiercest critic just as sincerely.
That dialectic, that constant back and forth, is where the truth actually lives. It lives right in the tension between the 2 points. It forces the listener to actively think, not just absorb. They have to decide for themselves who won the round.
Now, there is a structural rule in this mechanics section that I find really helpful as a broadcaster. It says, never simply summarize the text linearly.
And it follows up with, synthesize, present the ideas in the order that builds understanding most effectively.
Why is linear bad, though? A book is linear. It has chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Why shouldn't we just talk about it that exact way?
Because the author had to write it linearly. They're trapped in the medium of time and pages. But they didn't think it linearly. They had a complex web of ideas in their head. By the time you get to chapter 10, the author is subtly referencing things established in chapter 1. If you just recount the plot of the book, you lose all the deeper connections.
So we need to reorganize the material by theme.
Yes. You say, here is the author's overall view on human nature, and you actively pull evidence from chapter 1, chapter 5, and chapter 12. Then you say, here is their view on justice.
Yeah.
You are building a 3D model of the theory for the listener, not just retracing the author's walking path.
You're basically acting as a museum curator.
Yeah.
You're intentionally arranging the exhibits so they make sense together in a room.
Exactly. You do all the heavy lifting of synthesis so the listener doesn't have to. You turn raw data into information, and then you turn that information into insight.
Okay, we have finally arrived at the most exciting part of the manifesto, the climax. Part 5, the thought experiments methodology.
The document is very, very firm on this point. It's not a suggestion. It says you always end with the thought experiments segment.
And the rules for this are kind of wild. Rule 1, limit to 1 or 2 experiments. Rule 2, must be outlandish but plausible. Rule 3, must use scenario-based thinking to explore extreme possibilities.
Outlandish but plausible. That is a brilliant sweet spot. It needs to be crazy enough to completely break the everyday norm, but realistic enough that you can't just casually dismiss it as magic.
Why is this even necessary, though? Why can't we just stick to the text and the history?
Because of stress testing. That's the exact phrase the document uses. Put their ideas under stress and see what holds.
It's like wind tunnel testing for a philosophical theory.
Exactly. A theory might look absolutely flawless on paper. Let's say everyone should tell the honest truth all the time, no exceptions. Sounds very noble, sounds nice. But then you run the extreme thought experiment. You are hiding an innocent refugee in your basement, and the corrupt secret police knock on your front door and ask if anyone is inside. Do you tell the truth?
And suddenly the rigid theory cracks, or at least it violently bends.
The stress test instantly reveals the structural failure points of the morality. That is the incredible value of the thought experiment. It forces the purely abstract into the messy concrete. It takes the pristine idea out of the library and puts it into the dirt of the street.
The document explicitly warns against generic philosophical hand-waving. It demands vivid, specific details in these scenarios.
Because specificity grounds the experiment. Don't just say, imagine a bad government. Say, imagine a government agency called the Department of Verification that uses microscopic drones to scan your biometric heart rate spikes when you speak. Specificity forces you to deal with the terrifying, messy reality of the idea.
And there is one final, really crucial rule for this entire segment, the disclaimer.
Right. Entertainment and educational purposes only.
Why is that legally or even philosophically important to include?
It grants you license. It creates a necessary sandbox for the mind. If we are constantly afraid that exploring a dangerous idea means we personally endorse it, we will never explore the dark corners of human thought. We'll just play it safe forever. The disclaimer says, relax. We're just playing with variables here. No one is going to jail. It completely frees the imagination.
Okay. We cannot, in good conscience, do a deep dive about this manifesto without actually applying its own rules to it. We need to run a thought experiment on the Talk Treatises manifesto itself.
Oh, I love this. Let's do it.
Here is the scenario. We are in the year 2035. The global information landscape has completely collapsed due to AI deepfakes, relentless spam, and algorithmic warfare. Nobody on Earth knows what is real anymore. In desperate response, a new global government is formed, and they decide to implement the Talk Treatises protocol as the literal law of the land.
The epistemic republic.
Exactly. In this republic, this manifesto we've been reading isn't just a guide for an audio show. It is the hard-coded law for the internet. You physically cannot post a message, write an article, or speak into a microphone unless a central AI filter verifies 3 things. 1, you have internalized the facts, meaning no blind linking allowed. 2, you have identified and stated the strongest objection to your own claim. And 3, you are operating at +3 standard deviations of logical rigor.
So if I try to just angrily post, the other political party is total trash, the screen just flashes red and stops me?
Flashes red. Insufficient rigor. Please define your terms. Please steelman the opposition's platform before proceeding.
Wow, okay. Let's really stress test this. On the surface, I mean, this sounds like a total utopia. This information vanishes overnight. The public discourse becomes incredibly high level. Every single comment section on the internet reads like a graduate seminar at Oxford. No more trolls, no more bots, no more fake news at all.
It honestly sounds like heaven for people like us. A world completely governed by pure reason.
But look closely at that intellectual benchmark. +3 standard deviations. That is, by statistical definition, the top 0.1% of the human population.
Oh, wow.
If you make this the actual law of communication, you have just effectively disenfranchised 99.9% of the human race. You have created the most exclusive, impenetrable aristocracy in human history, the philosopher kings.
And what happens to everyone else? The millions of people who have valid feelings, valid pain, real lived experiences, but maybe just can't articulate the formal premises and logical steps of their suffering.
They're completely silenced. They become a totally mute underclass. Think about the single mother working 2 minimum wage jobs who is just furious about local school funding. She tries to post about her anger, but she doesn't know the deep historical context of the school board budget, so the AI blocks her entirely. The artist who speaks purely in emotion and metaphors, not strict syllogisms, blocked.
So the absolute pursuit of truth has ironically destroyed democracy.
Precisely. The stress test reveals the fatal flaw. This manifesto is perfect for a controlled environment of exploration. But if you try to scale it up to a mandatory system of government, it becomes incredibly tyrannical. It values intellectual competence over human participation. It completely deletes the messy human element.
That is a terrifying thought, and it inevitably leads to the conclusion of our thought experiment, which is what happens next in this society?
Violent revolution. The 99%, the bumper sticker people, they don't suddenly sit down and learn formal logic. They smash the AI servers with hammers. They burn the epistemic republic to the ground because the fundamental human need to be heard is vastly stronger than the need to be factually correct.
Which brings us beautifully right back to the very balance the document tries to strike in the first place. Conversational, but sharp. It's trying to bridge that exact gap.
Right. It wants the intense rigor of the philosopher combined with the warmth and empathy of the dinner party. It's actively trying to prevent that revolution by making smart, complex thinking accessible and human. It's saying you don't have to be a mutant genius. You can be part of this +3 standard deviation world. Just come join us at the table.
In disclaimer, this thought experiment was for entertainment and educational purposes only. We are not actually advocating for a philosopher king dictatorship or a global AI censorship regime.
Definitely not. Though I have to admit, it would be really nice to have slightly fewer trolls on the internet.
Just a few less. Anyway, we've arrived at the final section of our breakdown today, part 6, the structural breakdown of a perfect discourse.
The document actually provides a literal beat sheet for an episode.
Yeah.
It's almost like a fractal. The structure of the show perfectly mirrors the structure of a good argument.
Let's run through it quickly, just so the listener can clearly see the skeleton of what we have just done for the past hour. Step 1, the opening. The hook and the thesis.
Tell them exactly what you're going to tell them. Set the stakes immediately. Why should they care right now, today?
Step 2, the main analysis. This is the heavy lifting. The context, the argument, the objections.
The anti-summary. The meat and potatoes of the work. The deep archaeology of the idea.
Step 3, the real world check.
Why is it living unresolved? Why is this incredibly old book still haunting the modern world we live in?
Step 4, the thought experiment.
The creative application. The final stress test.
It really is a continuous loop. You hook them emotionally at the start, you drag them through the dense intellect in the middle, and then you completely release them into the imagination at the end.
It's brilliantly designed to hit every single part of the human brain. Memory, logic, creativity. If you skip even one step, the learning just doesn't stick. If you only have the logic, it's dry and boring. If you only have the imagination, it's just pure fantasy. You absolutely need the whole loop.
It really is a masterclass in communication. And frankly, it's kind of ruined me for other content now. I'm going to be listening to the evening news tonight, constantly looking for the hidden premises and demanding steelmans.
Oh, once you see the Matrix, you simply cannot unsee it. You will start seeing those lazy bumper stickers absolutely everywhere.
So let's wrap this up. We have thoroughly dissected the Talk Treatises manifesto. We've learned that true, deep knowledge requires a lot more than just memorizing disconnected facts.
It requires the mindset of absolute respect. Respect for the audience and respect for the truth. It requires the anti-summary discipline of actually digging for the original source. It requires the context of history, knowing the prevailing view of the time. It requires the strict mechanics of steel manning and synthesis. And finally, it requires the wild creativity of stress testing through thought experiments.
If you take absolutely one thing away from this deep dive today, let it be this. You have the inherent capacity to operate at +3 standard deviations. It is not some rare genetic trait. It is simply a choice. It is the active choice to pause, to dig deeper, and to constantly question the bumper sticker.
The very next time you feel that sudden rush of, oh, I know the answer, just stop. Ask yourself, do I really know the answer, or do I just know the catchy slogan?
Be the architect, not the tourist.
Very well said.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought, a provocation, as is our longstanding tradition here on The Deep Dive. This was not in the text we analyzed today, but it has been seriously gnawing at me during this entire discussion.
All right, hit me with it.
We've spent all this time talking about applying this intense rigor to other people's ideas, to old books, to the news, to public debates. But what actually happens if we turn this weapon completely on ourselves?
Oh, boy.
Think about it. If you took your most deeply held fundamental belief, your politics, your religion, your personal definition of what constitutes a good life, and you ruthlessly subjected it to the Talk Treatises protocol. If you had to completely strip away your own bumper stickers, rigorously identify the premises, steelman the strongest objections against your own life choices, and stress test it in an outlandish thought experiment, would your core belief actually survive?
Wow.
Or would you find out that you, just like the rest of us, are really just a collection of slogans waiting to be deconstructed?
That is a genuinely dangerous thing to ask people to do on a Friday afternoon.
Maybe it is. But honestly, it's the only way to really know what you believe. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We will see you all next time.